Now, airports around Europe could be set for more baggage chaos this year. That's according to my next guest, Eoghan Corry, who joins me now, editor of Air and Travel magazine and, of course, Ard Clock resident. Good afternoon, Eoghan.
Our most important of all, Caoimhe.
Eoghan, tell us what's happening, because it's not good news maybe for travellers, is it?
It's been sort of a recovery winter. Let's find the bags that were lost. We're down to about 200 bags of the 20,000 bags that went astray in Dublin Airport last summer. About 200 of really, at this stage there would be discounters. But the big question is this going to happen again? And there's absolutely no guarantee it won't. In fact, I've said it's quite likely to happen. The reason is that most of the bag losses, even the Dublin ones, about 80% of the bag losses in Dublin were bags that were never loaded on the aircraft in the first place. And the two airports that caused most of those problems, 4 airports caused a lot of the problems, but the two that caused the most are Heathrow and Amsterdam. And in both cases, the airport have said, we're in trouble, we haven't got our staffing level back to pre-pandemic level, and we're going to be in trouble again this summer.
OK, so basically it just comes down to manpower, Eoghan, does it?
Everything has changed in baggage. You have these amazing, this amazing technology. You got bags being coders, so that, let's say, a passenger misses a connection, they can find the bag of all the bags in the underbelly of an A330 or whatever and get it off without having to wait for ages. It used to happen in the old days. They have all this where they can track your bag. They can tell you it's being loaded in this particular airport. This is being put on this particular truck. All of that technology was going forward in leaps and bounds. When I was going to these big aviation conferences, and quite a good deal of talk was about baggage, and it was all about how the technology has moved on. And we thought we were looking at a situation where bags would never be lost again. Somebody forgot that you need men, and it's always men, it's usually men, big burly men, to actually lift those bags, put them on the aircraft, take them off, put them on a truck. When it came to the summer of 2022, they were in short supply. Trying to recruit them was a big deal. There was a change in security clearances in Dublin Airport earlier in the year, which meant that the companies that subcontracted this, particularly Sky Handling and Service Air and the Aer Lingus baggage handlers, they tried to staff them up, and they couldn't staff them up fast enough. Dublin's problems were replicated in airports all over Europe, but in particular in the two I mentioned, Heathrow, Amsterdam. On the other side of the Atlantic, Toronto was a big deal. JFK was a big deal. We had situations, Caoimhe, where the captain of an aircraft was told, we can get your bags on board for all your passengers, but you'll have to wait 5 hours at the gate. And he just decided to go without. That happened in more than one instance during the summer.
Would the passengers be told that they're flying off without their bags?
That they were.
Oh, okay.
It was a Toronto situation, WestJet. We had strikes as well, by the way. The French ground handlers went on strike a couple of times. There was a couple of strikes in Switzerland. We had bags. We had an aircraft arrive from Zurich for an Aer Lingus with no bags, not one of the bags of the passengers. Now, all of that in a normal, in normal times, you'd lose 50 bags a day in Dublin Airport. It's the sort of thing that happens because the bags don't go into a terminal. They're taken off the aircraft, put in a truck and brought directly to the other aircraft. And while the technology is working and while everybody knows what they're doing, it was, there were still a couple of bags that went astray. That went up to over 300 a day during the summer. We had 11,500 bags that were responsible for the responsibility of Aer Lingus. Usually Aer Lingus are the end of the chain. The difference between Ryanair and Aer Lingus is Ryanair gets you from A to B. Aer Lingus's big concentration has been a connecting, more than one flight sector, people coming through, the likes of Heathrow, the likes of Charles de Gaulle, the likes of Newark and JFK and Chicago. So they were the end of the chain, and about 11,500 bags incidents reported to Aer Lingus last summer. 9,000 of those bags weren't even put on the aircraft in the first place, but Aer Lingus was left with the job of finding them. And usually in the old days you'd get the bag. Most bags were found within 48 hours, and they were put in a little truck and sent off to wherever they were supposed to be. It was chaos during the summer. Where I live in Arklough, the van going to the K Club was appearing every single day with tons of lost bags in them that had finally been relocated, by which time the golfer had gone on to another golf course somewhere down the west or the south. So it was very much find Wally with bags and customers all through the summer.
Okay, so Eoghan, I suppose, look, most people listening will be wondering, are staffing levels back to what they were pre-pandemic now? And, should we be okay for this summer?
Staffing levels on security are back. So those security queues end last weekend in March, last weekend in May. The listeners will remember what happened there. The Dublin Airport will be able to handle that. Baggage haul, they say they're up to speed, although there has been with one of the subcontracted people. And, you've got two big airlines in Dublin. You've got about 30 other airlines, and they subcontract the baggage. So they say that they're pretty much back up. But my alarm bells are going off because I see the issues in the two culprit airports for most of the havoc of last year. They're nowhere near back staffed where they should be. So the moral of the story is, don't put anything you don't expect to lose in your bag. And while Ryanair will only fly from point A to point B, you get on your aircraft in Dublin and you get off in wherever it's supposed to be going, Salou or Beauvais or Barcelona or Salou. But you've got to, they won't lose bags because it's pretty much the passenger's responsibility. A lot of people use Ryanair as a sort of a self-connecting hub. Let's say you don't have a direct flight from Dublin. They fly to somewhere like Stansted. They collect the bag and then they check it back in again. That system is working perfectly. It's all going astray where you're relying on the airline to transfer your bag from one flight to another.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can never erase human error. People have bad days, sure, we all have them, and it's only natural that things like that are going to happen. In terms of strikes, Eoghan, because I know during the week there was strikes in France and Ryanair had asked the EU to step in and stop these strikes. Do you know anything about that, or what's the update?
Yeah, the French are on strike again today. About 20% of the Orly flights, and we only have one service from Dublin to Orly. 20% of the way it works is the French air traffic control go on strike. They tell each airline to cancel a certain number of flights. Usually it's a percentage. It can be 50%, it can be 20% in this case. Charles de Gaulle not affected. That would have been a big deal. And Southwest France not affected. But it's really looking bad for the summer. The French are lining up for a whole series of new strikes. The big issue, there are several burning issues, but the big burning issue is the pension age there. And the French were we got a lot of publicity about cabin crew strikes. Usually, unions saying, we're going to go on strike and stop Ryanair. In fact, they didn't manage to curtail any of the Ryanair flights last summer. I think the maximum in one day was 12. In the case of Spain, Belgium a little bit more effective. But the one strike that really causes problems is French air traffic control. Usually Marseille is where the action is, where the strikes take place. But they can affect overflights. They can affect flights from Dublin to Spain. And they did last year. And Ryanair's press statement during the week was, why not allow Spanish and Irish air traffic control to take command of these flights? There's no safety issues involved. It's purely political. It's purely a national issue. Each country likes to handle their own air traffic control, which is fine when they're not going on strike. And they're really, really pushing on this, that if the French air traffic control can cause over 1,000 flights to be cancelled at short notice, what's happened to Ryanair in September. Something like 12 people involved in the strike, by the way. It was just that the authorities asked Ryanair to cancel all these flights, causes havoc, costs a lot of money, causes havoc for passengers, and also leads to huge payouts and compensation payouts on behalf of the airline, because they now have to reschedule the aircraft are in the wrong place. It's a big ongoing issue. We've strikes today in England, by the way. The tube is unaffected, luckily enough, although the Bakerloo and Elizabeth lines are both affected. But the Stansted Express, Gatwick Express and the Heathrow Express are all not running. There's going to be more of this, Caoimhe.
Okay, in terms of what Ryanair are asking for then, they want, say, air traffic controllers from Spain or Ireland to actually take over from the French when they strike. Is that it?
Pretty much. Once you're at a certain height, if you're not going to be landing in France, there's no reason for you to be flying below a certain height. At that level, any air traffic control across Europe, if we had a centralised air traffic control in Brussels, which they're looking for, there's supposed to be a single. I've been covering aviation for more than 20 years. They've been talking about it for 20 years. A single European sky with an air traffic control system that manages. It doesn't mean just that the individual national unions don't have the power they have to stop international aviation. It also means a lot for emissions. They say, there are different calculations on this, but it could be that we are consuming 30% more fuel than we need to, just because our 27 different air traffic controls aren't joined up and don't have the freedom to overfly each other, or there's so many handovers and there's so many vested interests involved.
Okay, and where are they in Europe in terms of a European air traffic control? Any progress on it?
Lots of talk and no action. We've got pretty much Eurocontrol. Listeners will know Eamon Brennan from Galway is the Commander-in-Chief of Eurocontrol. He's been lobbying at it for a long, long time. The European Commission have seemingly on side, but the member states are not. It's sort of into the labyrinth of Brussels politics. But it comes back to one thing, Caoimhe, which is that national governments are reluctant to let control go of something as key as that. And obviously they're beholden to the vested interests within. And in somewhere like France, the air traffic control unions have an inordinate amount of power. There's another problem with them. There are three of them and they're competing. So, if you're competing for members, if you're competing for headlines, the more militant you are, the better for your profile. And that isn't good for aviation passengers.
Okay, well, Eoghan, thank you very much for joining us today. You're always
a great pleasure, Caoimhe.
Thank you. That's Eoghan Corry there, editor of Air and Travel magazine, with that news that airports around Europe could be set for more baggage chaos this year. And of course, flights could be interrupted or disrupted because of strikes that are planned. There's strikes going on right now in France, and there will be to come in the next few months as well.